now. Good morning, everyone. I can see everyone's nice and engaged already in the chat. Thank you very much for everyone joining today. This is the third and final of our professional development learning series based around the SIT package upgrade. For those who have been in the previous couple of webinars, you might know what we'd already covered off, but I'll just do a bit of a recap just for everyone's benefit. So in our first webinar, we spoke about the different industry engagements that we've done. We've tried to approach this upgrade in a very holistic way, and it's been critical for us, especially with the position that the industry is currently in at the moment. It's been critical for us to hear as much input and feedback from different members of the industry, whether that's the actual professional industry or whether that's from the RTO space or any of the industry bodies. It's been really important for us to get that feedback and input to best inform how we were going to approach this package upgrade and our product overall. So that was our first webinar where we went through a little bit about the product and a lot of our industry findings. Then our second webinar, we had a number of the different industry panelists and consultation individuals that we'd worked with over the process of upgrading this package and how to approach it. And we had a bit of a roundtable discussion about some of those findings and getting that input, which is exceedingly valuable. So thank you again to everyone who joined in on that one. And today's webinar is going through, I guess, more of the product as far as we see that approach being, and really tackling into how we have tried to make that most applicable to a variety of different teaching methods that are going to be required now, as well as how it can be best implemented in a way that's going to be meaningful and relevant for students who are preparing themselves for a career in this industry. So first of all, I'd like to break that down into three major areas. First of all is ease for trainers. I'll go into this in more detail shortly. Second is ease for students as far as the product goes and their engagement. And finally, all of that is umbrellaed by the connection that this product and the way that everyone in the RTO space is able to deliver this new training package to be able to connect with industry and best prepare everybody. Okay, hang on. Apparently my camera is off. Apologies, everyone. So everyone can't see me?
No, Luke, we can't see you.
Oh, that's very interesting. Apologies, everybody. Just one moment. Try that now. Is that working now? It was on. I'll just reset it. Can everyone see me now?
We can see you.
Excellent. Apologies for that. I'll be sharing my screen a lot of this, so you won't have to look at me the entire time. So what I'll start with is the actual product itself and to the approach that we've taken for the package upgrade. So the main one is for trainers. We've received a huge amount of feedback from a number of different trainers very recently and all throughout the year, and even with the old package as well. The big aspect of cookery especially, but the SIT package overall, and certainly a lot of other training packages, is the pressure that trainers are always under to be able to deliver the content and the assessment requirements within the very constricted timeframes that they usually have to be able to get through each unit and move through the course. So there's a number of different aspects to the product that we have tried to create in a way that's going to make life a lot easier for the trainers and also provide opportunities for different ways of engaging with it and facilitating that content. So if I just share my screen now, I'm going to start off with the knowledge assessment requirements that we create. So the old package that we had, all knowledge assessment requirements were covered off with knowledge tests or knowledge questions. And one big piece of feedback that we received is that depending on the student cohort, depending on the time constraints, it's very difficult a lot of the time to be able to cover off these huge amounts of knowledge requirements from a marking perspective as well. Trainers already have a huge amount of pressure to be able to facilitate courses. And then the added time for marking is definitely a huge pressure. So just one moment, we've got a few people in the waiting room that I just need to add in. So what we've created for this new package is two different versions of our knowledge test questions. We've got our short answer questions, which were always part of any one of our products that we created. And then we've also created a second version, which is multiple choice or self-marking. So the idea for this is obviously trainers aren't having to go through that process of marking sometimes up to 60, 70, 80 questions for every student for every unit. And it's also a way that students are able to engage with it more effectively, depending on what the nature of that student cohort is. So again, from a trainer accessibility perspective, because there is such a wide range of students that we have, and especially in the SIT space, a huge amount of international students that come and study with us. It's really important that from either an English as a second language perspective, from a prior experience or knowledge perspective, we make these assessments as accessible for the students to be able to comprehend and to be able to answer, as well as for the trainers. So not only does that save on the potential marking time, but also just from a facilitation and shepherding the students through that process. If trainers are trying to present this information and have students complete their assessments, but just due to the nature of the student cohort, they're unable to comprehend the short answer or process that information in writing the short answer responses, that can be an additional taxing aspect of the process. So creating those two different types of knowledge tests has been really important for us to be able to allow that flexibility for trainers and RTOs as to how they're going to implement that for their delivery. The second key aspect of the ease for trainers part of the process, and especially for cookery, is the introduction of facilitator guides. So there is two purposes to this. First of all, from the perspective of theory, learning, especially within the practical units and cookery, like cooking recipe-based units, it's really important for us that we can allow the opportunity for theory to be covered in as comprehensive and efficient way as possible, so the trainers and students are able to maximize the amount of time that they're able to spend actually in the kitchen doing those practical classes. So we've created these trainer facilitation plans, which go through all of the key foundational knowledge and theory side of all of the units. And these can be used obviously for the trainers up in front of the classroom to be able to go through that theory. And also if they were doing some theory training simultaneously while they're in the kitchen, then these facilitator guides are designed to be an additional helpful facilitation tool for trainers. In partnership with that, we've created some digital SCORM packets that mirror these facilitation guides. And again, that's designed with dual purpose for ease of trainers. So part of the accessibility of these different SCORM packets is that they're not purely just an assessor-only tool. They're also available to the students. So students are able to either have these taught to them by the trainer as using them like interactive PowerPoints up in front of the classroom, or because the students do have access or can have access to these on their LMS, it can be assigned to them as prior classroom learning, so that once they do get into the classroom, that amount of time spent on the theory side of things can be minimized and we can get students into the kitchen quicker. So again, as far as a flexibility perspective, the idea is that we try and make the the process as malleable and interchangeable for the trainers as possible to suit whatever their delivery schedule is, and their facilitation requirements for the students. The second version of these SCORMs that we create as well is based around the knowledge requirements for the unit. So again, depending on the student cohort, asking students to go back through the entire learning content, so the digital textbook that comes with every unit. Again, for international students, for apprentices and trainees, and for younger students, that level of self-directed kind of study and being able to source that information can often be a challenge. Again, something that ends up falling onto the trainer's shoulders. So we've created a second version of these SCORMs, which mirrors the content that we cover off in those knowledge tests assessments. So the idea is that students are able to have basically a condensed set of the learning content that they can then go through as they are doing their knowledge assessments to be able to more easily access that specific information that they need to be able to answer the questions. So again, that is something that is designed to assist not only the student, but alleviate a lot of that pressure that trainers are constantly facing. Finally, as far as the ease of use perspective, we have our generic marking criteria for all of our practical assessments. So again, this is an example from the Prepare Poultry Dishes unit. Previously, we in the older package had marking criteria for each recipe that was designed quite specifically to each recipe. However, if you look at the training package for any one of the practical cooking units, for instance, all the performance criteria is generic and it's pretty much rinse and repeat for every single unit. So poultry, meat, seafood, basic methods, it's the exact same generic process. And it's only once you get to the performance evidence where it starts introducing specific ingredients types, specific preparation techniques, and specific methods of cookery. So what we've created here is these marking checklists that are generically based and more aligned with those generic criteria in the performance elements. So the idea for that is not only a condensed version of the marking criteria, so ease of marking for trainers, so it's not taking up an enormous amount of time with having 85 different criteria that need to be ticked off for every recipe for every student, but also allowing interchangeability of recipes. It's definitely something that's been brought to our attention through a lot of the feedback we've received from the last couple of years, that unlike with other training packages or other types of qualifications, changing cookery resources across to an entirely new platform or an entirely new set of resources is quite challenging, because most RTOs will have a set of recipes that they're comfortable using. It's tried and tested. They've been able to make sure that they do actually work functionally in the time that they need it for, or availability of ingredients in the area that they're in. There's myriad different reasons for it. So it's not as simple as like with, say, BSB resources, where it's a lot more straightforward of a process to try and adopt new resources. So the idea with these generic marking checklists is that if, for instance, the rolled chicken breast is not a recipe that you would like to use because you have an alternative substitute that has been tried and tested, you could very easily use that other recipe, but still have this same very applicable marking criteria that has been validated, is compliant, and is going to be covering off all those criteria. So again, from a trainer's perspective, not having to worry about just new learning content, but then a whole new suite of recipes that need to be adopted. This is designed to alleviate a lot of that, a lot of those pain points. So those are the main criteria, and I should mention at the end of this, I'm going to try and allow plenty of time for questions. This is our real big opportunity for proper deep dive into the actual product. So for the end of this webinar, we're going to be looking at the chat and answering as many questions as we can. So very happy to revisit this and answer any more specific questions that anyone might have. But as far as the trainer ease of access perspective, those are the key criteria that we've tried to adopt in this development of our content. The second main topic that we've tried to address is ease for students. So a lot of these kind of overlap with the trainer ease of access. So again, the multiple choice questions that we've created, again, designed to, I'm just going back to it, designed to allow easier comprehension for students that may have, an international background. They may be, quite young and just entering the space. They may still be at high school. So having that level of ease of access for questions and being able to answer based on those key knowledge criteria is really important for us as well, because again, if students are unable to properly comprehend or properly engage with the content, then down the track, the flow-on effect of that is that even if they do get through their course, excuse me, they're not going to be as prepared and set up for success in the actual industry workforce as they should be. Similarly, the SCORM package that we created, as I mentioned, the idea is that students would still have access to these rather than purely just being a trainer facilitation tool. So if we look at this one, for instance, we have a number of our custom videos that are put into them. And the idea is that students are either assigned this as pre-classroom learning or purely just as an out of interest resource that they might want to look at before the theory training starts or before they get into the kitchen so that they can already be able to get an understanding and an idea of what the actual processes are they're going to be putting in place once they get into the kitchen or into that practical setting for their training. And the same thing for units that are more theoretically based. We have those SCORM packets that mirror the knowledge evidence as well, so that they're able to more easily access that information they need to be able to answer the questions. And as a point for feedback that we've received even just recently, originally in our product, we created the SCORMs either around the facilitator guides or for units that didn't have facilitator guides, we created them purely for the knowledge requirements. However, a lot of the feedback that we've received is that those SCORMs that we had for the knowledge requirements to help with the knowledge test access is something that was really valued. So what we're actually introducing now, even though we've already started the product upgrade, is that we will be creating a second set of SCORMs for these units that have the facilitator guides, a second set of SCORMs that will also cover the knowledge evidence requirements. So regardless of what unit it is within the SIT package, there will be a suite of interactive digital SCORMs that students can use to be able to assist with those knowledge evidence tests. And finally, as a excuse me, ease of student access perspective, the approach that we've taken for our learning content, the main digital textbook that we create for every unit, is designed to be a lot more holistic and encyclopedic than I think probably the approach to learning content has taken in the past. So rather than students purely having a book that teaches them straight to the performance criteria or purely just targeting the actual recipes that they need to pass their assessments, we create this learning content to be more foundationally underpinning. And this is supposed to have two key outcomes to it. The first one is so that when they are prepared for industry, they actually have that foundational knowledge of ingredients, ingredients bases, cookery methods, so that regardless of what they're faced when they get into the industry, they are actually adaptable and flexible to be able to apply that knowledge to any particular type of cuisine or any particular type of dish or menu, because they haven't just purely been taught how to cook X, Y, and Z recipe, and then that's it. So that holistic approach to the content is essential for us. And then the other main outcome for this is that because it is a digital resource built in the software and the online capacity that we created it in, this is a resource that students are going to be able to take with them for the life of their career in the workplace. So even once they finish their studies, or they're no longer actually enrolled in with an RTO or in a course, they will still be able to have access to this link to the digital resource, which is hosted by Learning Vault. And so they will be able to have this encyclopedic and holistic content that they can refer back to at any stage. And so as you can see in this content, we cover off not just, performance criteria 1.1, where it talks about selecting ingredients. If I'm learning about poultry, the first thing that I should be doing is not selecting my ingredients, because I still don't know anything about poultry yet. So it's really important that we create this content in a way that's going to define what poultry is, give a big thorough background about types of poultry, its lineage, how to source quality, how to tell quality, and with balance and texture of cuts and everything like that. All the mise en place processes, all of the hygiene, equipment types, food safety, all of those key criteria that are foundational to every type of ingredient, every type of situation that you would be approached with in industry, setting up that foundational underpinning. And then within our learning content as well, we do also have a chapter, especially for all of the practical cooking-based units in cookery. We do have all of those recipes that students will be using for their assessments, and all of those come with the custom video that we've created for it, as well as more stage breakdowns of that process, so that they can fully understand the different stages that would go through when cooking that recipe. So again, purely just as a resource that they can keep in perpetuity and keep referring back to. It's a really excellent tool for them to have for when they're not physically in the kitchen on site in the RTO, and they can still have that resource to be able to refer back to. Now, the third key topic of what we've tried to address, and this is probably the most important one for this entire project, is the connection with industry. So of all of the different pieces of feedback that we discussed in our first and second webinars, the different insights that we got from different industry members, I think the key takeaway one for us was the disconnect that has happened between students who are training in RTOs and their readiness and preparedness for what faces them in the industry once they get there. It was a really important point for us, because my personal assumption was that, well, COVID was the thing that resulted in all this. But the feedback that we got was very much that this is a gap that has been forming for quite a number of years, going back way before COVID. And that's a combination of a few different factors. The training package is certainly one of them. The industry relevance of a training package is not always on point, which I'm sure that everyone is well aware of. It's not always on point to exactly what the trends and expectations are of industry. And so it's really important for us that we attempt to bridge that gap in the best way that we can as far as the product goes. And a key example that I want to use for that is the new vegan and vegetarian dishes unit that's been added to this new package. We have been doing quite a lot of consultation in the creation of that unit. And one of the key things that got pointed out to me was, and I'm going to bring this up so that I can illustrate it. In the entire performance evidence of the unit, we go through a huge amount of different vegan options and alternatives, dairy substitutes, meat substitutes, talking about mince, portion control cuts. The assumption being that we also talk about, beyond burgers and patties and those processed products. At no point in this unit for vegan and vegetarian dishes is mushrooms or fungi mentioned, not once. And in the past, even before these processed vegan products had come onto the market, mushrooms have always been one of the key like meat substitutes and key ingredients in any sort of vegan or vegetarian cooking. So the fact that it doesn't exist in this training package at all, to me, doesn't compute to what the industry expectations would be for a student once they get there. So if we followed the training package completely and said, well, it's not in the training package, so we're not going to mention mushrooms in any of our content or any of our assessments, that, to our point, would be an exceedingly large disservice to students in their preparedness for what they're going to be facing when they get into the industry. So what we're adopting with the way that we're building our resources for this unit at the moment is that we will have a number of recipes and a significant amount of the learning content covering off mushrooms and fungi and how to use that in vegan and vegetarian cooking. So that to me was, and this is something that was I only stumbled across in the last few weeks when we've been doing consultation for this unit build. And that to me was a glaringly obvious and very good illustrative example of how the training packages are not always up to spec and reflective of what the actual trends are that are required. So that connection for us, as far as the product goes, and how students are being provided this information is a critical factor. And then the second key factor for that full connection with industry is that holistic approach. So we're not purely just here to teach students how to cook X, Y, and Z recipe and then send them off into the world. Our responsibility in creating this content is to be able to provide a holistic and foundational experience so the student's journey is going to be seamless or best preparing them for when they get into the industry. And that then comes down a lot to the facilitation and the RTO side of things. As I've said, there are many different types of student cohorts, many different ways to deliver content and to facilitate, and there's a lot of different requirements that RTOs face when they are selecting how they're going to be delivering all of this content. So for us, setting trainers and RTOs up for success as best we can so that they can be able to provide that content that's relevant, most relevant to their particular students and help them to bridge that gap. Because again, a lot of the conversations I've been having recently, even up until yesterday, and which is very encouraging to see, is that there is a huge amount of knowledge and experience and passion within the RTO space and with trainers. And there is the reality, and everyone seems to be aware of it, there is the reality of this kind of vicious cycle that we're all in, where trainers have to teach to the training package requirements, because otherwise at audit, there will be severe consequences. And that, to an extent, ties their hands as far as, in order to cover off a unit as quickly as possible, to cover the required assessment needs of the unit, they have to teach certain types of information in certain types of ways and assess that information in certain types of ways. But that then comes full circle in that, is it providing the right type of knowledge and experience for the student so that they're set up for success when they get to the industry. So being able to keep that communication and conversation up within this space, and my connection to trainers and RTOs is one of the most critical factors for us. And the more that we can keep consulting on that, the more that we can keep continuously improving our processes to best help RTOs is a key factor in us being able to help get this industry back on its feet. And a few people who are in this room are probably at the same function I was in last night. The terrifying statistic that our tourism and hospitality sector is currently 167,000 people short, qualified people short. There is an insane demand, both domestically and internationally, for people to enter this workforce, and a huge amount of incentive as well. You know, pay rates for hospitality workers are going up, which is exciting and excellent for people looking to enter the space. So in preparation for getting this industry back on its feet, it's more critical now than ever for organizations like Learning Vault and for RTOs and for trainers to be able to have that industry connection and be able to deliver training to students in the most effectual way for their readiness for the workplace. So overall, purely just teaching the training package to our mind is going to result in certain gaps. So the overall product that we have tried to create is something that's going to be able to help bridge those gaps and the relationships that we can build with RTOs to be able to help keep refining that and make the process as seamless for trainers, seamless for reporting and assessment, as well as enhancing that student engagement and the student learner journey. That's the full package that we're trying to approach with this SIT upgrade. And something that we've been working very hard on. We're really looking forward to keeping up that communication, receiving more feedback so we can keep improving as we go. So overall, and I know from a product perspective, I didn't dive completely deeply into the actual ins and outs of certain assessment tools. I wanted to wait until we could allow for some question time and some input from everyone in the chat. And I'm very happy to go into some deeper detail as far as everything goes. So if anyone has any questions, please start putting them in the chat, or I haven't been looking at the chat the whole time. I'm not sure if there are more questions that have come through along the way.
No questions as of yet, Lukey.
No questions yet.
Just waiting on a few. I've got a question.
Yes.
To kick things off. What's been with the package upgrade? What has been the biggest challenge or the biggest sort of adjustment you've had to make compared to when you built the old package before? What have you had to be mindful of?
Probably the key one would be the time that, and this is where the ease for trainers aspect comes in, the time it takes to, especially for cookery units, to actually train and assess all the requirements. I think the reality is that a lot of these units are written overly with levels of over complexity and too many assessment requirements. So that results in a huge amount of pressure on trainers to be able to deliver all this stuff in time. So for us, for instance, with the marking checklists that we used to build for the cookery recipe assessments, we had probably 50 or 60 different individual criteria, and then you multiply that by 8 recipes per unit, multiply that by 20 students in a classroom. The pressure that then puts on the trainers is unrealistic. So we've certainly had to make some significant adjustments as far as not compliance, but as far as how we create those checklists to best cover the requirements in a realistic way that's going to be possible for trainers to facilitate.
Okay. We've got some questions coming in now, which is great.
Yes.
Gina, is the practical checklist filled in digitally like a Canvas rubric?
Yes, absolutely it is. I will show you. So again, this entirely depends on how you, as an RTO, are delivering your content. So this is the document that I was showing earlier. This is how it exists on an LMS. So Canvas is the example here. And again, depending on the LMS and depending on how you want to build this checklist, we've also created it in a way where you can potentially tick off entire subsections in one go. So as you can see here, we've got category 1, chosen obtained ingredients with the 2 sub criteria. There are certain ways that this can be built onto LMSs where the only tick box would be for number 1 here, not for each sub criteria. And then you're able to upload any additional evidence, put in comments or whatever you would like to cover off both of these criteria. Same for number 2, undertook mise en place would technically be the only tick box, but then under here, you would need to put in additional comments that supported certain aspects of this. But the good thing about these generic checklists as well is because they are so standardized, and because regardless of the recipe that students are doing, they're going to have to do these criteria over and over and over again. If, for instance, in the first recipe, a student wasn't observed doing a certain one of these criteria, obviously throughout the other 6 or 7 recipes in that unit, they are going to be doing it. So we could put a comment in there for a certain recipe saying this wasn't observed, particularly in this recipe, but it has been in another one. So to answer the question, yes, it absolutely is built as a digital rubric. And there are a number of different ways that you can interact with that and build it onto an LMS.
Have you got an example there of what that might look like within when you're actually grading an assessment on Canvas? Have we got a? Oh, there we go.
So currently this is built as each individual criteria needs a result next to it, a tick. So if the student has been observed doing this, then excellent, excellent, excellent. They didn't do that one, I could put a comment in saying, yeah, it was observed in another one of the recipes. Excellent, excellent, excellent. So it's definitely a much more efficient process than trying to hand mark something on, say a Word document. And then obviously purely the admin flow on of then having to upload that document to the SMS and things like that. So yeah, having that digital rubric is certainly a much more efficient way to mark. And again, because all of these are being assessed in a kitchen, one recommendation that we've used in the past is if trainers have some sort of tablet or handheld device that they're marking all of this on.
Perfect.
So while they're actually in the kitchen, as they're observing, they can tick these off.
So just sticking with this, we've got some line of questioning around the quizzing and multiple choice, which we'll come on to in a moment. But another, just while we're in this area, a question around feedback. Where is feedback recorded? And I think it's probably similar to what you were saying before about around it being a platform component. But maybe just if you can speak to that, that'd be great.
Absolutely. So again, this example is on Canvas. It will vary depending on the LMS that you're using. But so here, additional comments, additional evidence, anything like that can be provided at the bottom of any marking checklist, whether it's a practical one like this or whether it's the bottom of a quiz. Comments can be provided to the students here. And additionally, other versions of multimedia feedback can be provided. So we can attach pieces of evidence if we've got videos or photos, evidence from students role playing or students dishes, things like that. We can also do multimedia recordings. And once this decides to load, sorry, the bandwidth might be freaking out a bit with the webinar running at the same time. But this would come up with my face on the camera, and then I can do a video voice recording to provide to the student as well that they'd be able to see. So especially, this is a handy tool, especially with the knowledge tests. If a student, so let's say you were doing a short answer test and the student didn't get a certain question right. Yeah, I don't think that's going to work because we've got too many other things going on. And so there was a certain question they didn't get right, rather than having the student then go back in to retake the test just to answer that one question that they haven't gotten right yet. We could potentially cover that off by having a back and forward multimedia conversation with the student. And you could get them to again, because students can record themselves responding, they'd be able to elicit a verbal response. And again, for international students, that can often be a really powerful tool, because a lot of the time they may not, purely because of the language barrier, they may absolutely understand the question and know how to answer it and practically be able to do it, no worries at all. But purely from a writing perspective, they can't elicit that response properly. So we can get them to provide that answer in a verbal capacity.
Which kind of leads on quite nicely to a couple of questions that are coming up around essentially the sort of the customization, I suppose, component questions around being able to add or utilize their own recipes, or being able to add in additional quiz questions or use alternative assessments. Obviously, the way that we have built this into Canvas has that flexibility. Maybe talk to the team a little bit around that, if you can.
Yeah, so basically, yes to all of that. You can absolutely customize the content to add whatever additional questions, whatever additional recipes or anything that you would like. When using this product, you know, whether it's on an LMS or files have been shared, you have absolute autonomy over anything that you would like to tweak or change. But from the recipe perspective, to go back to those generic marking checklists that I was talking about earlier, that's been specifically designed so that if you had your own recipe that's tried and trusted and you wanted to use that, then you would purely just be able to sub that recipe in and keep the exact same marking checklist as well, because none of that marking checklist pertains to the specifics of that recipe itself. So you could absolutely, if you had your own bank of assessments that's been mapped, you know it's compliant, you want to keep using them, you could absolutely just keep that marking checklist, sub out all of our recipes and use your own, definitely.
And it's worth noting there as well, Luke, because there's a couple of questions around this theme. This is literally just what it looks like on Canvas. But we have RTAs utilizing these materials across multiple platforms, be it Cloud Assess, Accelerate, Moodle platforms, Brightspace. I think there's a whole host of new ones coming up that people are utilizing as well. So there's different ways in which that information will be presented, depending on, particularly when it comes to sort of these marking tools like we're looking at here. Really depends on the functionality of the LMS that you're utilizing. But by design, all content is created so it's agnostic. Agnostic, is that the right word? Ultimately, it can be dropped into any LMS that you're utilizing.
And to do a shout out to, you know, all the LMSs, especially the ones that we've got experience with. The functionality of each of those LMSs is quite versatile as well. So there's myriad ways that you could choose to build it. So like I was saying, for instance, with this checklist, you can build it individual criteria wise like this, or you can build it, you know, where the heading for each section would be the tickable outcome, and then all of these dot points come underneath it. So you can condense that marking checklist even further. So that's an example, but there's absolutely quite a lot of flexibility in how content can be built.
So a nice kind of curly compliance question here for you, Luke. Do you think if you use multiple choice questions for all knowledge assessments, is it okay from a compliance perspective, as there won't be any feedback in that case?
That is an excellent question. It's a little bit of a cursed question. Our due diligence statement that we would give is, our recommendation would be to use short answer questions as much as you can, purely because that will get you out of hot water with ASQA. Yes, the multiple choice questions we have are compliant, absolutely, but depending on the ASQA auditor you have on the day, sometimes they do take umbrage with self-marking questions. We don't do any true or false, because that absolutely crosses the line for them, because it's just a 50-50 luck chance. But yeah, I have experience with ASQA auditors being absolutely fine with self-marking tests for Cert 2, Cert 3. But I've also heard examples of where for Cert 3, they don't think that multiple choice questions really cut the muster. Anything over Cert 3 though, I would strongly advise not using multiple choice questions purely as your form of knowledge assessment, because it will absolutely start to get scrutinized by ASQA.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but by design, your team have built these so that RTAs have a choice, so they can go down. They can utilize short answer and more robust answers, or they can utilize multiple choice. And then I'm guessing that by design they could do a mash of the two if they wanted to. In particular cases, they have that flexibility.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we provide, it would be a little bit more of a contextualization exercise, but what we provide with the product is 2 versions of the mapping document as well. So a version that has all of the multiple choice questions mapped, and then a version that has all the short answer questions mapped. So if you wanted to do a hybrid, you could quite easily see that, okay, question 1, 2, and 3 in the short answer test can be used, and then correspondingly question XYZ for the multiple choice can be used for the next set of knowledge evidence. So you could absolutely do a hybrid as well.
And just to expand that slightly further, looking at from a trainer's perspective, questions around model answers. What's within the product? What's provided to support that component?
Yep. So multiple choice questions are a little more simplistic. Obviously, the model answers are just put next to the different choices. But for the short answer questions, we absolutely have benchmarks for every single question. And those are designed to be reflective of either optional but not limited to responses or must-have responses. So depending on the question, we will provide a series of examples, but certainly caveating that students could give any other types of examples that might not be on that list, as long as it's sort of industry justifiable. And that's where the skills and knowledge of the trainer assessor makes that fairness, that judgment call. And then for questions that are undisputable, so, what legislative act is this for, where there is only one correct answer, then our benchmark would say the answer must address this specific piece of legislation or this act. So it is that guidance of, well, if the student hasn't answered that exactly as the benchmark answer appears, then that is an unsatisfactory answer.
And what's our approach to observation checklists? How are they written and constructed? Yeah,
so observable skills is the key criteria for that. So anything that we create in our observation checklists will be, so every criteria will be reflective of the actual practice that the student has to do. So for instance, share my screen again. So if we use this checklist, we create it in a way where each one of these will be an observable outcome, rather than just saying, can the student choose ingredients? The sub breakdown of all of these are the individual actions that they would then be performing as part of that industry realistic process.
So it's written in observable language ultimately, rather than it just being a copy and paste from package requirements.
Yeah, exactly right. So some of it does. So anywhere where the training package is on point and the way that the training package is worded is actually perfectly suited, we will use that training package language. But a lot of the time, what we find is that the training package is kind of the high level version, and as far as the realistic process goes, you need to break that down into more base observable tasks, and that's how we create the checklist.
Understood. A couple of functionality questions around capabilities. I think we can kind of wrap these into one question really, and it kind of boils down to the LMS. Questions around students being able to upload evidence on their phones to Canvas, integrating with other systems. I think maybe just for clarity, Luke, you maybe just explain the sort of the components that we create if someone was to receive this, say, in a Dropbox file, and then ultimately how that can then be distributed depending on the LMS that's being utilized, which then falls into the functionality and capability of those systems.
Yeah, so two different ways predominantly that RTOs will interact with our content. First and foremost, either because we are LMS agnostic and we do already build our content onto a number of LMSs, you would basically get those units provided to your account on that LMS and you can plug and play it. Or if you wanted to build onto your own LMS in your own way, then, as you said, the Dropbox sharing option is where we provide you with all of the different files. So these Word documents, links to the digital resources, and that can be built in any way that you would like to onto your LMS. And then as far as an integration perspective goes, most LMSs these days have quite strong interfaces with student management systems. So as far as an evidence capturing perspective, if you had evidence going up as far as videos or multimedia, or even those little feedback video recordings and voice notes and everything, part of that LTI integration with the SMS is that it would extract all of that student data and evidence and the marking outcomes from their gradebook and get captured onto the student's profile on the SMS, which makes it quite easy for you to process all of that event-based reporting and things like that RTOs have to do.
And so just to clarify as well, there's a question in here. No, ultimately LearningVault don't have a Canvas LMS or an LMS of any sort of real preference. It would be more working with the individual RTO on systems that they're currently using and understanding the best ways of populating our content on that system. As Luke mentioned, the likes of Cloud Assess, Canvas, and NewSpring, Accelerate, we already have content as part of our process. Content is automatically built onto those 4 platforms as standard. So if you are utilizing any of those, we can literally switch it on. If you are using anything else, then it becomes a process of understanding what that system is and how best to provide the files in order to for you to be able to utilize them. Question here, a nice one around industry consultation. If the RTO chooses to use these resources, how could they be supported with evidence of industry consultation?
As in the industry, I suppose it's the industry consultation that we have gone through in informing how we build this, or industry consultation that the RTO would be conducting themselves?
I think supporting evidence with supported with evidence of industry consultation. Yes, how you conducted it. Yeah, so how we conducted our industry consultation. So do we have the ability to provide that evidence in some form of documentation that an RTO could utilize?
Yeah, that's a good question. We haven't put it onto paper before, but yeah, we absolutely could. We can detail the different workshops that we ran, who was present in them, so who the representatives from industries and RTOs were. We could document what the sort of like what I've been talking about in the previous webinars, what the findings were, what our action points from that were as far as how it's influenced the approach to the training package and the creation of the product. So yeah, that would, I suppose, just be putting pen to paper and actually documenting all that. We'd be absolutely happy to provide that to you.
Because we already have all the content, and one of our goals for next year is actually to turn that into a bit of a white paper, so it would actually be available for people to utilize. So yeah, to answer that question, we certainly can do that.
Yeah,
couple more quiz questions. Are the quiz questions written to match learning? Okay, good one here. Are the quiz questions written to match the learning resources?
Yes, they are. So all of the information that you need to answer the quiz questions are in the digital textbook, but the creation of those SCORM packets is designed to condense that process. So rather than, if a student can't remember that piece of information off the top of their head, rather than having to go through the entire digital textbook to find the answer, which is in there somewhere, they have those digital SCORM packets as well, which will follow the progression of the quizzes, covering off all those key knowledge requirements that are actually training package reflective. So that's the easier way for them to do it. But yes, our textbooks are built to cover all of those criteria as well.
Excellent. There's a question here from Gina, and I think it might be something that we'll just need to send post-webinar unless you have access to it now. Could we please show an observation checklist for something specific like hollandaise?
Do
you have the hollandaise to hand? Or
I do, but to the point of the idea around the generic.
Yeah, so that's that. Can you hear me?
Yep.
So I was just really wanting to know if they're all generic or you have specific observation checklists for, you know, for hollandaise, a velouté, a bechamel? Are they, you know, so the student knows what is expected of them to, in order to achieve a successful hollandaise?
Yep. So not specifically in the marking criteria, but in the actual instructions and the recipe card for the hollandaise, there will be instructions saying, okay, this is what you need to do. This is the process you need to follow, and then it will have all the ingredients. It will have the method that needs to be followed, and in doing that, you've also got the marking checklist, which is the generic requirement. So I'll bring it up just so you can see it. Now, it might just take me 45 minutes to actually find it because this unit has 10 million recipes in it. Okay. Okay, so we've got the basic learner instructions for the task and the process that they have to follow to achieve that. The actual recipe card is a digital resource that we've created. So this exists for every recipe. So we have the video of it being done. We've got the ingredients required, the method of the process that they have to follow, and then the step-by-step images of the video that we've created around it. But then as far as the actual marking checklist goes, we again have that generic sort of approach. So you can see, so this is still the old package version, for instance, and you can see that we've got a huge amount of criteria that are in here. This will be condensed to an extent for the new package, but it's all still covering quite generic criteria in the actual marking checklist.
Okay.
Does that answer your question, Gina? So the specificity around the recipe is in.
Yeah, so I could add to that, couldn't I? So I could say, you know, that when in the emulsification process, they, you know, so I can add comments in there.
Absolutely, yeah. And you could even add additional criteria to be ticked off if you would like. So if you actually want your checklist to target specific stages of, like, you know, specific to the hollandaise itself, so emulsification process, things like that, you can absolutely add criteria in there to tick off for sure.
Yep.
Luke, I'm just conscious of time. That sort of brings us to 12. So did you want to maybe just talk about sort of next steps? People want to reach out if they want to have access to samples. Obviously, everyone gets the link to the video. Sort of where to from here?
Absolutely. So, and again, I'm aware that there could be many more questions that people might either have in their head at the moment or that they could think of down the track. Very happy to answer any of that, jump onto a call, do more of a product deep dive personally. So please reach out. We've obviously got everyone's details from the attendees of the webinar, and everyone will be getting their professional development badge for this. So we can absolutely establish that communication. We'll be sending the video across for everyone to have as well. But then for next steps, if people are wanting to have a bit of a sample that they can play around in, do a bit of a validation or sort of mapping exercise for their own purposes, or to have a look at any sort of recipe lists that we have for any of the units, we can absolutely provide all of that to you, and then, you know, continue conversations as needed from there. So really, it just depends on, I guess, what aspects of the product you might be interested in looking at, or what other questions that you have. But I'm absolutely available to answer any of those questions, or jump on any meetings to do some deep dives with anyone who's interested.
There'll also be a guide that will be sent out to everyone that's attended any of the webinars, any of the 3 webinars thus far. So obviously everyone on this call, which is actually our guide to the new package, which looks at how to transition, the differences between the things to look out for, things to be aware of that can be utilized and circulated within everyone's organization. So after the webinar email that will go out in the next 24 hours, you'll then also receive the guide to the SIT transition, which will be coming out very soon.
Awesome. And thank you very much for everyone attending. It's been phenomenal to see the amount of engagement across this whole webinar series. So a huge thank you for everyone taking the time to join us. And this has been a hugely invested process for us to make sure that we try and get this right and hear as many voices as we can on this new package and what the industry needs. So it's absolutely been a labor of love for us. So it's great to see that so many people from the industry have been engaged. So a huge thank you for everyone who's attended.
Thank you all very much. And thank you to Luke for guiding us through these 3 stages.
Thanks very much, everybody. All the best. Talk to you soon.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.